Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Supervision Matters podcast with Rita Sever, a leadership coach, HR consultant, and author of Supervision Matters and Leading for Justice. So everybody, it is January 2025, and we're going to be doing our first episode in 2025 of Supervision Matters, which started back in 2024, the end of the year, with Rita Sever, who's been on our show for many, many years. And excited to have her talk about today about how to set people up for success. This is a very important thing when we think about, in business and an organization and just about anything we do. You want someone to do something for you. Well, then you set them up for success. So let's talk about that a little bit. Rita, welcome back. How are you? Happy New Year.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be here. Happy New Year to you. So yeah, excited to talk about this.
Well, supervision matters. This is what we talk about. And so supervision, when we hear that word, sometimes we go, oh, someone's watching me. But that's a good thing, actually.
Well, it can be, and it can be too much sometimes.
Ooh.
So my view of supervision is that a supervisor and staff member work in partnership to fulfill or move closer to the mission of the organization, whether it's a profit or a nonprofit, whatever the mission is. You want to work together to build success. And I don't think of supervisors as better or smarter necessarily. Often they have more experience, but the bottom line is they have a different role. They have different responsibilities, different decision-making roles. And part of their job as a supervisor is to set their staff up for success, as you said, to help them know what they need to know about how to do the job and about how they're doing in the job so that they can tweak it as they need to and be successful. And then the supervisor will be successful and the organization will be successful.
So, and I think you said something really crucial that I think gets forgotten day to day, like really big, in that you said, like, a supervisor is not gonna, like, everybody's at a different place. So a supervisor may be supervising a group of scientists, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Sure.
scientist has no clue how to manage people. The scientist may be playing microscope, maybe out in the field, like hiking into the Arctic. Who knows, right? But their skill is that, and the supervisor, their skill is actually working with people and getting the best from them, right?
Hopefully.
Getting the best from the management too, right? Isn't that part of it
that
too?
is their skill set. Yes.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, because it's not like, I think sometimes people think management and supervision is better than the people doing the
Right.
work, and that's actually, everybody's actually doing what they're good at, what that's
Right.
supposedly.
That's what we want to have happen. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Very important to point that out, because just because you may run a company doesn't mean that you're the scientist or the author or the publisher or whatever it is. It just,
exactly.
you know how to run a company no matter what.
And sometimes people are promoted because they're good at their job. And so people say, okay, we'll give them a promotion to reward them. And suddenly they're managing people and they may or may not be good at it. And they may or may not like doing it. So finding the right role for each staff member is critical. And again, that may or may not include supervising people. Like you said, the scientists, they want to be out in the field. They want to be doing what they were trained for. And sometimes that includes supervision, and sometimes it just gets in their way.
Well, I think that happens in an entrepreneur's journey, is that they're really good something. Maybe they're coding, all this geek stuff that, I sure as heck don't know. But they're doing this really amazing stuff. Their company blows up, and then they go, oh, heck, now what?
Right.
And then they have to bring people on board, and they don't even know. They just know they need help. And so they need to get to someone So that's the HR. We always talk about human resources being such an important conduit, is kind of that balance of, you could have someone who created the company be a genius,
Mm-hmm.
but can't communicate with the rest of the people.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really true.
Oh,
So I
okay.
want to introduce this acronym I came up with. And
Okay.
the acronym is SCOPE, to sort of underline the role of supervision. And I love that you use the example of scientists, because SCOPE, I think of the role of a supervisor is both a microscope and a telescope. So
Oh,
when you're thinking of the telescope, you're thinking of the big picture, you're looking at how things are working, are the systems in place, is every part of the team doing what they need to do? So you're looking at the big picture. The microscope, you're looking at the details.
ooh,
Is this person doing what they need to do when they need to do it in the way they need to do it? So both of those together give you an overview of supervision. And the scope is an acronym, so it stands for, each letter stands for something. But I like just the idea of the scope. And before I go through what the letters stand for, I just want to say microscope may make you think of micromanaging, and it can be micromanaging if a supervisor is in too much of the detail and really
mm,
watching every little thing and commenting on every little thing and forgetting the telescope. And so don't fall into the micromanaging aspect of microscope. And I also want to say sometimes you need to do that. Like when somebody comes on board, you need to be a little more hands-on. And if that's the case, name it. I tell new supervisors or supervisors with new staff, let them know that the first 6 months you'll be more hands-on than you will at any other point in their tenure, hopefully.
but speak at the beginning about
Yes,
that.
let them know that this is not the way I intend to supervise you once you know
Mm,
what you're doing, once you know how this job fits in the organization. But at the beginning, I may be a little more hands-on than is comfortable for either one of us.
mm. That's important because the micromanaging can get to a point of you're not letting anyone get to the creative ideas that propel a company forward, right?
Exactly. You stifle them from
Oh,
trying anything.
don't they always say, like, hire someone smarter than you?
Right. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
you're talking about,
At
like,
least in
here's a
that
head.
role. Yeah,
Yeah, here's this, somebody genius creates something, but then it's like it doesn't matter if it can't get out there, can't be sold, can't be done. You could be someone amazing with this amazing idea, amazing way to make it happen, but if you don't have the people backing you up and getting it out there to the world, you ain't got nothing.
right, right. So I
It's
think it's smarter than you and or having different skills than you. Like
mm,
I'm good at this, so I'm going to hire somebody who's good at, I don't need them to be good at what I'm good at. I need them to be good at something I'm not
mm.
good. So both.
Yeah, and that happens with nonprofits. I know that you've done so much work with nonprofits, and I want to bring that up because sometimes a nonprofit role becomes such a big deal in that I'm passionate about this. And so I ended up creating a nonprofit over it. But you have to kind of at some point let go as a person so that you can go forward and it actually be successful. I've seen so many issues. Like Nancy and I do a lot, as you know, parks and travel and wildlife. And I've seen certain causes literally cripple because there's no supervision. And
Mhm,
everybody's off doing their own thing, all these little nonprofits, and no one's speaking to each other. And
exactly.
the actual issue that is like of huge concern goes away because
Hmm.
of it.
Right. They get down in the weeds and they lose sight of the telescope again.
So okay, going to the telescope, microscope. So HR sits in the middle. That's the supervisors, really, in a way, right?
A little different, but they're related, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. So someone has to sit there and go, hey, y'all, you're going too far here. You're getting a little bit in the weeds, and we need
Right,
to bring it on in.
right.
Okay. So to be, yeah. And that, oh, it's so hard. So let's go to scope, microscope and telescope. Oh, I like the microscope, you know.
Yes.
So let's talk about the S of scope.
So
Set
that,
up for success. Yeah.
yeah, that's where we started. That I just want people, supervisors, to remember that that is a big part of your role, and it can be a touchstone. Is this conversation I'm going to have with this person going to help move them towards success, or is it going to drag them down? And I'm not saying that you can't, you have to have hard conversations sometime, and those can help set people up for success. If you have to give someone hard feedback and say, you blew that meeting, that's important information for them to know so they can be successful. So keeping in mind that you want to help them be successful. They may or may not be successful, and you may have to deal with that, but at least have your intention to be, I'm going to do everything I can to help them be successful. So
So when
that's
they
the
go
F.
to the meeting, do you help them go do that meeting or afterwards give them pointers of what they could have been done, what they could have done better?
Yeah, depending on, what other factors are involved in that meeting. If it's the first time going to the meeting, maybe you go with them. But at some point they'll be on their own, and then debriefing with them. First, how did it go for you? What worked, what didn't work? And then maybe you've heard from somebody else that, this part really wasn't handled correctly, then you might have to talk about that. So,
Mm. And it's also important in a way, right, to have communication with others. If this didn't go well, like, hey, y'all, they just came. I'm in the South now, so I can say y'all. Well, come on, it just softens the blow. But that is a point of don't, if someone like a comedian bombs, right? If they don't deliver their joke and it bombs, right? I mean, comedians have to like bear that all the time. And
yeah,
I think that's what's the beauty of comedians. They still get up
yeah,
and
it's
wear their
amazing.
heart in the sleeve. I'm a huge fan of comedians for that.
Right.
But when you go into a meeting, you could bomb. You may not
Mhm.
even get to say what you wanted to say. You may not get your time. And if you get your time, it may be 1 minute versus five that you were promised, right? So all these
Mhm.
variables can happen, and you may have your biggest competitor in the company sitting there and stealing your idea. If you let your idea, I mean, all that stuff can happen, right?
Right.
But when it goes down, when the bomb hits, let's just put it that way, communication afterwards is imperative, isn't it? You can't just let it
Absolutely.
go. You can't just let
Absolutely.
the bomb drop.
No, you can't ignore it. That's not going to help anybody. It may feel good for the supervisor to avoid that hard conversation in the moment, but you're not helping the person learn what they need to learn, not helping the
And they may be feeling
company.
like a failure, and maybe it wasn't even their fault. It
Right.
could come from an upper level too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why
Yeah.
it's important to start with having the conversation. How did it go? Hear from them first. Yeah.
Mm. So communicate is the C word.
Exactly. You opened the door already.
I
That's
did it. I did
perfect. That was
it.
wonderful. So communication, and this is both speaking and listening. Supervisors need to listen at least as much as they talk. It's never about just, I'm just going to tell you what to do and then the meeting's over. It needs to be a two-way conversation where you hear from your staff what's working, what's not working, how's it going with your colleagues, anything else we should talk about. Just keep those lines of communication going. And it's also about communicating up and down, if you will. I don't like to think about the hierarchies in that strict way, but most organizations do have some form of hierarchy. So letting the people above you know what they need to know about how things are going and how people are feeling, how's the morale, and relaying information from the top to your staff. And one of the big parts of communication is what we were just talking about, making sure you give feedback and receive feedback. And feedback is both positive and challenges. What's working, what's not working, how can we do this better? What are our priorities? What are our goals? All of that is part of communication,
Yeah,
as
it's kind of
well as
what we
staff
went back
meetings,
in December's podcast. We talked about that.
right?
Everybody having this communication, because it could be the employees and they're, you don't make sense to me. I don't
Right,
know,
right.
and so it could be vice versa. So that
Yeah,
is the important thing, is everybody be on the same plane, you know?
exactly. You know, if two people on the same team are undermining each other, you have to talk about that.
Ooh, that's not nice.
Yeah,
Oversee is, oh, so
right.
we're going scope, everyone. Again, just reminding
Yep.
everyone scope. So, oversee. So that gets into the supervision. So that means checkup on the communication and what's going, that checkup.
Yeah. It's the telescope view again, that you're making sure everything's moving along. You're connecting the dots between the people in your team who are doing different things. Um, does this staff member know how their role supports the mission? One of the things I talk about often is that any staff member at any point in time should be able to connect the dots between what they're doing and the mission. And
Mm.
if they can't draw that line, is it because they don't understand, or are they doing something they don't need to be doing? So that's part of the overseeing, is supporting, looking at the big picture, looking at the small picture, coaching, guiding,
Mm.
making sure the whole team is moving things along. So that's often the first thing that people think of with supervision, is I'm going to oversee everything. That's definitely part of it, but it's not the only part of supervision.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's important. Now, partnership. I love this word, because
Yeah,
partnership, and it goes in so many different ways. It's between clients, customers, back to
right.
the company, whether it's a nonprofit or not. But actually, partnership within the organization could be
Exactly.
partnership outside that affects the organization too.
Right.
From what our employment attorney, Ward Hendricks, always goes, now you got to watch out what's going on the other side too, you know, and
That's
that
true.
affects things. It does
Yeah,
affect your personal life, can sometimes eke into,
of
and
course. We
that's
are
that.
who we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the concept of working in partnership, and I think really it's
Mhm.
about respect. The idea of working in partnership is what we talked about earlier, that it's not I'm better than you or you're better than them. It's we're all working for the same goals, we're on the same team, we're rowing in the same direction, whatever analogy you want to use, that we need to strengthen our work together to be stronger, to be synergistic with it, that when we all work together, we accomplish more than we could if we were working individually.
That's so important. I look at next year, America celebrates 250 years of independence. Now,
Wow.
that does not include our Native American indigenous people, obviously, right? With the way the history ran, but 250 years. And I hope as we go that we look at this partnership, that is actually what it is, right? And
Yeah.
it's in communities, within our nonprofits, within our businesses. You've got to look at who you partner with. So many times in a community, you'll go into a community meeting, which is important. I don't care if you're a business or not. If your community is having meetings about bettering your community, you should be there, right? You really,
Absolutely.
that's actually, can, can we just put that as part of partnership? Be
Sure.
in partnership with your locality.
Yes. Yeah, because that really centers the greater good, which is part of most of the mission, most of the work. Even if you're going for a profit, if you don't keep the greater good in mind, then you're not going to be successful, because you're going to lose people, either as
Mhm.
customers, as staff, as clients. So absolutely centering community partnership, internal partnerships, external partnerships. It again is all about working together.
And that brings you feedback.
Absolutely.
If people are going out in your organization, be nonprofit or for profit, and they're going into the community and they see something, they're like, oh, we're not addressing this, or we could be the first to address this, or we have, you, by not going out, and I mean, we need to go beyond social media. We need to go beyond our screens, really, all of
Mm-hmm.
us in some
Right.
ways. I mean, we've got all these great tools, which is great. You can do a lot just that way. But I think most larger organizations, and most larger nonprofits have to have some semblance of going out in their field.
A-
And they
Absolutely.
need to use that information that they go, even just they meet one person and one person has one comment, that could change everything in an organization. Anything. I
Right.
mean,
Absolutely. And I want to just caution that it may or may not be your problem to solve, but maybe you can
yes.
connect the people who can solve it. That's part of being part of the community too. Like, I know somebody else who had that same thought. Let me connect with you with each other and carry it forth from there.
And 5 years later, we'll turn around and really help you. And you
Right.
just don't know when you did it. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah,
isn't that how life is? And people need to remember
absolutely.
that partnership is not about immediate gain.
Right. Absolutely. There may be immediate or you're often
Yeah.
planting seeds.
So in within the organization and partnership and supervision, how does that balance out? Like, okay, I may be a supervisor, HR, I may be the owner, I may be, the executive director, but I want you to feel that we're in partnership to make XYZ happen. That's
Absolutely.
important, right?
I think it's critical because again, it shows staff that you respect their role and it's not that, you know, your role doesn't matter. It's about we all have a job to do to make this work and let's work together to do that. So
Mm.
absolutely. We each have our role, we each have our responsibilities and our level of decision making, whatever we each need to decide about, all of that will work together to move us towards our mission.
Ah, yeah, I like that. It is about teamwork,
Absolutely.
but you
That's another
always
word
have to
for the
have a leader.
partnership.
You
Yep.
always have to lead. When you think about like a bicycle race, you have the person going, I'm going to cycle this race. You have someone that helps organize you to get there, the leader, not necessarily on the bicycle, but they're putting it together and making sure that there's someone supporting you, like HR, giving you water and fluids and food at each station. But you have to have the leader. And does that make sense?
Absolutely. I often think about the admin of an organization is so often behind the scenes, but without them doing what they do, the groundwork, the work out in
Yeah.
the community couldn't happen. If somebody isn't balancing the checkbook every month, you're going to get in trouble fast.
Well,
So
that's
admin,
so. I mean, some nonprofits, they're like, how much money is going to the thing versus admin, and sometimes admin is what it is to make this one thing happen. Is majority needs to be admin, so everybody's perspective of that, I believe, you know, not everybody. I shouldn't say that, but there's this perspective, general
mhm,
perspective that we shouldn't be paying for admin if we donate to a nonprofit.
exactly.
I go bullwacky. I'm
Right.
going because there's
Exactly.
people helping the people in the field. You want people out filming the what's going on with elephants in Africa while they're being slaughtered and they're losing their lives and they need to get a hotel at some point. Well, hello, who's arranging all of that? Who's getting the feedback? Who's getting the content out there? Who's making the social media work? Who's making the funding come in? And
Absolutely.
who's
All of
making the
that.
actual changes in Congress and in CITES, international wildlife trafficking?
Mhm.
Like honestly, the
Yeah.
admin isn't, I don't understand where that
No,
whole thing came
how it got
about.
a how it got a bad name. I use the analogy in terms of admin. I think of it as the skeleton. You don't see it, But boy, if it's not there, it's not gonna stand
It's
up.
gonna get wonky. It's gonna get wonky. It is.
Right,
Because
right.
people are human, and it's like, if someone's sick or something like that, somebody else has to be able to, it's like a
Figure
restaurant
it out.
needs, you can't just rely on the chef to be the front person and the chef. You can't have that.
Exactly. And of course, there are instances
Well,
when
there's food trucks and
admin's
stuff like
over
that,
the
but
top
yeah.
and paid too much, but that's rare, very rare.
Oh, and that does happen. It
Yeah,
does happen, but it's, yeah, there's some definite good ones on that one, that we could cite, but I don't want to. Um,
right.
but 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 the
They're the
reality is,
minority. Yeah,
majority is, and even some of the smallest nonprofits do the biggest things. They do.
sometimes. Yeah,
So we all have to just kind of look at, like, what is the goal of what they're doing? What are they doing? And just think about the manpower that it takes to make that happen in the field. Nonprofits are not all about being out in the field.
right,
Sometimes a nonprofit is all about indoors and being online. It could
right.
be.
Yeah, like
Everything
you
is
said,
different.
writing laws, doing whatever
Oh
is
my gosh, grant
behind the
writing too.
scenes. Yeah,
Oh, we need
exactly.
that. Oh, speaking of grant writing, expectations. Well, I
Yeah,
think we were leading good. This is your scope works really well. I didn't even have to look. I'm like, oh, I'm already going there.
very good.
Expectations. Well,
Yeah,
expectations for nonprofits, what we were talking about, it's like the admin. But let's talk about expectations within the core of the organization, be it profit or
right.
for nonprofit. Yeah.
Well,
Whew.
and specifically, again, I'm all about supervision, and expectations are one of the primary tools or avenues to make sure you're working in partnership and people know what they need to do. They know what the benchmarks are. They know what their job description entails, unpacking all those bullet points so they understand it, how it fits into the greater picture, and what they will be measured on, how they will understand if they're being successful or not. All of that is part of expectations. Too often, people just use vague words like, make sure you work with your teammates, make sure you're nice to each other, make sure you get out and meet the community members. Okay, those are good things, but what does it mean? What does it look like? When I go out in the community, am I supposed to talk to people or hand out flyers or build community or just observe? All of that is important to understand.
Mm.
And sometimes people either use vague words or they just sort of assume that, well, you know what you need to do.
Oh, I
And
hate that. What you just said
yeah,
just got me because people have done that to me. Oh,
yeah. And, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but until you talk about it, you won't know. So being clear about expectations, including expectations not only about what to do, but how to do it. So you're
hmm.
doing the work in alignment with the values of the organization. And then also understanding how it interacts with each other is part of expectations, how my role supports that person who works 3 buildings away. If I don't do my work, then they can't do theirs.
The
That
ripple effect. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And just making sure you not only convey that information, but again, listen. Are you on the same page? Do you have
Hmm.
the same understanding of what the expectations are? Because you can't hold people accountable if you haven't told them what you're looking for.
I'm gonna put this in a very simple way of what, Nancy and I go through as we travel the country. Now, so Nancy and I, for those who don't know, Nancy and I, my mom and I, who run Big Blend, travel the country full time documenting parks and public lands. And starting in during COVID, we ended up pet sitting through an organization, Trusted House Sitters, which is not about us making money. It's a simple trade of we're taking care of people's pets, which we love because we're animal people, and they can go off and travel, and we're in a safe place and we take care of their animals. And it's called Trusted House Sitters. For It's about everybody's working together with trust and expectations, just what you said. And I wanted to bring this up because we have to review each other. We do a
Mhm.
pet sit. You can't, it's a blind review. Like if you get a place on
Right.
Airbnb, you blind review each other. And we have made the best friends in life. Some have been on podcasts, honestly, authors, writers, artists, you name it, travel advice. I mean, it's just amazing what has come through this. But we talk about that as when we do reviews, did you set us up for success as
Right.
going to a health sit? There's community guidelines because the ripple effect is huge.
Mhm.
What happens? Because someone could fly in from another country to take a pet sit in this country, in America. And if the person didn't do what they lived up to, it's not just a horrible experience for them in that household and animal. It's a liability if an animal is in danger or runs away or something like that. But it's a ripple effect of the community and actually our country of how we
Mhm.
welcome somebody. So
Yeah.
there's all of this that happens. And when we look at reviews, we use that as, did you set us up for success? That's how we look at it.
Great.
Nancy and I,
That's
that's our
wonderful.
terminology of it.
Yeah.
And it came from one sit we did, and they said, oh, if they set us up for success. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't think of it that way. But
Mhm.
if they filled out what's called a welcome guide and put in everything we needed to know, if the electricity went out, if the refrigerator did this, oh, this has got a weird plug thing here, and sometimes this did this.
Mhm.
This dog does that. So if it growls at this, you know why. Here's the vet
Right.
information, all of that. You're set up for success.
Right.
And here's what we expect you to do, the expectations of what we need to be done when
Right.
you sit here. You look at this in advance. And I'm not doing a promotion for trusted house sitters. I'm just telling you because it's an easy way to think of it. You look
Right.
at, oh, I can walk the dog once a day. Oh, it's 5 times a day. I'm not doing that. So I wouldn't take that sit
Right.
because I cannot live up to those expectations.
Exactly. Yeah.
That
And
kind of
so the
thing.
parallel to supervision is very clear. That's a great analogy.
Yeah, it's just a very, and when people don't do it and then the other side does not live up to their expectation,
It doesn't work.
it
Yeah.
well put.
Right. Right.
You said it nice
And
and kindly
again,
for me, because if it doesn't, I'm gonna say, y'all, like, people get mad.
right. Right. Yeah. And that's actually a good place for us to move to wrapping this up, because expectations, you think of it most of the time, and most of the time it is from the supervisor to the staff. But again, the supervisor needs to listen to their staff member. What's working? Do you need me to do something different? Maybe the time I picked for us to meet with them on a weekly basis is the worst possible time for this person. That's something we can fix. So listening and hearing what they need as well.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point, because you could be, here's the supervisor, I want to meet at this time, and that's their prime sales time.
Right.
It
Yeah,
could be the prime time. Everybody's got a certain time that they're most successful in.
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean, goodness, when you look at social media, they go, so many people look at your post at this time.
Uh-huh. Right.
So
Yeah.
we have to look at that. Rita, it's always a pleasure. My gosh, you make me
Yeah. So
think every
scope.
single time. You always make me think every time I go. Everyone's scope. So again, the scope is set up for success for S, communicate for C, oversee for O, P for partnership, and E for expectations. Always go to supervisionmatters.com. Rita has 2 books that you can go and get now. One is Supervision Matters, and the other is Leading for Justice. So check it out. Thank you so much, Rita. Happy New Year, and can't wait for our next conversation.
Yes. Thank you, Lisa. See you next month.
Thanks for listening to Big Blend Radio's Supervision Matters podcast with Rita Sever. Keep up with Rita at supervisionmatters.com and listen to new episodes every third Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on bigblendradio.com.